Hello, everyone, and welcome to Featured Teachers, our monthly webinar brought to you by American TESOL Institute, where we highlight an amazing English language teacher, could be also a teacher trainer often, but not always, somebody who has been very active in English language teaching and inspired teachers and learners alike, and is been inspired by others out there. And as usual, we have a wonderful featured teacher to introduce to you today, Louise Garavaglia, and she's a colleague of mine as well. I'm sure we'll mention that along the way. And really glad to have you with us, whether you're watching live or watching the recording. Thanks so much for supporting American TESOL Institute and for tuning in. Hey, Louise is here. So glad you're our featured teacher, my friend and colleague, Louise. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me, Jason. I'm really happy to be here. I've watched many of your recordings with featured teachers, and I hope that I can bring something else to the table. I'll start by introducing myself and explaining why I'm here, why I teach, and what I do. So I came to Paris 30 years ago to teach English, and I didn't know that I would love it. I didn't know. And teaching is just so much fun. It's so great. I really love it. But quite quickly, I got to the stage where I wanted to organize a bit more and write programs and take more control over what was happening in the classroom. I set up my first company in the 90s. It was a very traditional kind of English teaching company. There was very little online. We did face-to-face, we did groups, we went into companies. I had an amazing team who I was lucky to keep years and years, some of them, because I sold that company and I started Prep It a few years later in 2015. Now, what's interesting in 2015 is blended learning was really improving. So what happened was I signed up with Victoria's English as a franchise, and I could use their blended learning tools. Now, it sounds very easy now, but 7 years ago, it was quite the thing, and it was excellent materials, and we built all our courses around that. And since then, I've just been devoted to blended learning and quality face-to-face teaching, and making sure that the two work together to get the most out of your students and to optimize your time as well as teachers. So that's what we're about really at Prep It. I still maintain the quality, and I still have my same team of teachers and new teachers I've met since who are, really at the top of their game, but they're all very tech savvy, and we try to mix that in everything we do.
Great. Well, I want to go back and talk about actually all of the things you mentioned, but starting with when you came from the UK to Paris to teach English, and you said you weren't sure what you'd think of it. How did you decide to do it in the first place? Was it because you could, there was an opportunity, you wanted to live in Paris, have that experience?
Yeah, I was teaching German, but just because I didn't have a job, and just because someone said to me, "Can you do German evening classes in this company?"
In Paris, because we're both in Paris. If you guys don't know.
No, I was in England. Sorry, I was in England. So I was teaching. Yeah, so I was teaching German, and then I was looking for a full-time job, and there was an advertisement in the Guardian, I think, for an English teacher in Paris.
Okay.
And I thought, well, if I can teach German, I can teach English, whatever. It's not the same at all. I soon found out.
And was your degree, I'm just curious, because we have so many new teachers watching, and teachers who may have just gotten a certificate but haven't gotten more experience at looking for jobs, etc. So is your background, like, did you go to university thinking about teaching languages, and German was one of them, or it was German, the German language that you set out to teach?
No, I went to university to study languages, but not with the end goal of teaching.
I see.
I wanted to use my languages, and in fact, at first I did German, and then I did French subsidiary. So my French was fair when I came to Paris, but German was my thing. I loved German, and what I wanted to do was be an interpreter.
Okay.
And I left university, and I was in the process of applying for the school in Bath for interpreting and translating. And I just couldn't face more study. I just couldn't, I'd done 4 years. I just couldn't face it.
You wanted to
And
get
I
out there
saw,
and do stuff.
yeah, it wasn't for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up applying for the job teaching. And actually I love teaching. It was, it was the right job. So
Excellent.
that's how I got here.
Great. So when you came here, when you said I could teach English, you wanted to teach at that point. You already knew that from teaching German, you had a good experience, and you thought I wanted.
Yeah, I liked it. Yeah, I did like it. I liked finding a system, finding a way of explaining it to somebody in context so they get it and they're like using it next time. Great. There's no better feeling. I'm sure you all agree.
I absolutely agree. Know exactly what you mean. I'm sure many people watching do, or if you don't, you will soon. But so how long was it after you got here that you decided you wanted to have your own school? How, it was pretty soon after you got here, or no?
I worked for 2 years in one company, and then I got another job, a better one, in another company.
You were teaching English in to adults?
In-house, at Moodlenex. It was a company called Moodlenex, yeah.
So students would come to you, business English.
Business English, yeah. You have to remember, this was the 90s, and not many people spoke English. The professional people, especially people over 30, not many of them.
Well, there wasn't as much of a need, I guess, especially internationally, right? For a French person at that point to need English. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And it was all changing, and they couldn't, they had to catch up. So yeah, it was not easy for them, and it was a new thing. It was a new thing to have English lessons in the company, and people were saying, well, "Why? Why do we need this? Why? Who's this girl? Why?"
So, what's the story of you going from teaching like that for another company to deciding to start your own school?
I didn't really decide. I was kind of helped along the way. So I left. I was on a temporary contract. I worked for a year at the Chambre de Commerce with Claire Oldmeadow. That's where I met Claire years ago, like 1994, 95. Yeah. So I worked there for a while, and then I was offered a job in Valio, and it was a good job. It was much more in the training department, with decision making. So I started working for them, teaching English and managing the French and German lessons and the suppliers and all of that. And it was great. But again, it was a temporary contract, and they wanted to continue, but with me as a freelancer. So basically they wanted to continue, and I thought, why not? And they helped me do the paperwork, and it was great. I started like that. So I taught.
So it was freelance work first. Yeah. So it went from working for a company to freelance to then organizing that into your own.
And then I was offered different Valio offices. So I needed somebody else. So I hired somebody.
Okay.
And then I was offered a site near Tours, and I freed up a day, and it was all organized, and they cancelled it from one day to the next. So I had this free day, and after I found out, a lady I knew called me up and said that her company was looking for English. So I went to that company, a bank, one day a week. I did, I taught everybody in various lessons, and all of this, it just went on like that for a couple of years. Then I got more companies interested. So then I hired more people, and I don't know how much you know about the administration of companies, but I was a freelancer, and then I made an SCRL, and then I employed people.
Okay.
And then
so it happened kind of gradually.
Yeah, it grew gradually.
Yeah.
And at the end of that company, I sold it in 2011. And I had premises, I had a classroom, I had 11 employees.
And that was Prepit, or that wasn't called?
No, that was SLS Languages.
SLS, right.
Yeah.
Right.
But Maria and Alan worked for me in that company.
Amazing.
And Mathieu and Isabel. Yeah, so they all came and followed me.
So guys, I have worked and continue to work with Prepit and Louise, and it's just fantastic, not just because Louise is fantastic, but because Louise is has this amazing knack for finding and training teachers. So the people that work with Louise are just amazing people, amazing teachers.
Yeah,
Really
they are. They're
committed.
all incredible.
Yeah. So was that also something gradual in terms of like you were freelance and then you decided, okay, I need one person, now I need another person, and then you kind of teacher training wasn't, you didn't set out to, I'm going to have a school. You didn't set out to say, I'm going to be a teacher trainer, right?
No,
You
but I
started
did.
training people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I had a bad experience after I left Moulinex. So I was on a CDD, so I had an unemployment. And I was very naive. I didn't know how it all worked, but somebody rang me up from a language school and offered me a job. And just accepting that job, they said on the phone, no, it's a job. So I was very honest, and I went to the Pôle emploi and I told them, they took away all my rights. But this job was, they told me it was 20 hours teaching a week, but it wasn't. It was like 10 hours. Okay. And it was like Monday morning, 6 a.m. at one suburb, 2 hours out of Paris, and I didn't have a car. And then it was 2 days later, 3 hours suburb, miles away, and 20 minutes walk to the bus stop in a very dodgy area. And I just had next to no money, and it was really hard, And I wasn't paid much when I was paid, or they wouldn't pay me if they decided I hadn't done something properly. They wouldn't pay me. And I tried to, I tried to get some, to have meetings, and they were just so bad. And all the other teachers were treated so badly, and that's all they talked about. And I thought, no, there must be a way of organizing lessons where the teachers are happy, they've got decent pay.
So you were inspired by this awful experience.
Yeah, it really bothered me. Yeah. And so I think that in part, when I started my own company, it was partly so I could control what I was doing, and I knew that if people paid for a lesson, they booked it in, I would be there. Yeah. And they would get what they paid for, and they'd get really good quality. Right. However, we need some organization behind it, and communication. And then when I employed people, I would never have sent a teacher to do something that I personally wouldn't have done myself. And I still abide by that rule. I would never, ever expect a teacher to go to a suburb which is too dangerous or too difficult or too far.
Right. You imagine yourself in every teacher's situation, I think. I really feel that.
Because I am a teacher at base. Yeah. Yeah. Also, for the actual teaching itself, it means I'm realistic about expectations and, start levels and what people want to do, and then the amount of hours, and is that possible? I try to be realistic about that, because I know what it's like when you've got, something impossible to do, and you've only got a few hours, and you can't be stressed that your language school is going to say, look, you should have done this. What's wrong with you? Why didn't he get his B2 level? Yeah. You have to be very realistic.
I want to talk about, I'm sure we'll get back to teachers, but I want to talk about blended learning and using sort of the main focus of why we're here, besides just introducing you to people and talking about your experience getting to where you are now. So using online resources kind of early on, and blended learning was the term. I don't hear that as much anymore. I wanted to ask you about that, if you feel like there's another term that's being used or what's happening. But what was good and what was maybe challenging or difficult about it then, like compared to now, I guess? I think that would be interesting for people to know. And give us a little context again. When did you start using online resources?
2015, not
2015.
before.
Okay.
People were talking about it before, and I'd seen various methods, but I was using them really just to help the teacher in the classroom, or just to find information, or to make lists and files and things like that.
Like LMS kind of stuff, like helping teachers manage.
There was a thing, Andrew Wickham.
Yes, of course.
Who to me was so far ahead of his time.
Yeah.
He invented a few things that you could use on a pocket PC. I don't know if you remember those.
I remember, and he's told me about the Pocket PC days.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he invented a kind of system of tracking hours and putting in your vocabulary and linking things in, that kind of thing. So
like an LMS. Yeah, like man. Yeah.
Yeah, like LMS.
Yeah.
And he did something very, very far-reaching. And I use similar methods, but not on Pocket PC, but on computer files and sharing documents, that kind of thing. But it wasn't proper blended learning.
How did teachers respond to that at the time? Did they think it was strange? Did they think it was exciting?
Yeah. No, not really. I think teachers were very much convinced that it was the time they spent with their student, and they were quite old-fashioned.
Yeah.
So it didn't really take off that way, but the teachers who liked it, it would help them to cover more ground or to communicate a bit better. But it wasn't everybody. It wasn't everybody. It wasn't a general thing. It's because, and also I didn't use online learning before because there were a few methods out there, but they weren't very good, and they couldn't replace the teacher.
I'm not
so
surprised.
You know. Yeah.
What about just online resources, like using something from the internet, whether you're downloading something or you're actually on the internet, the students are on using something or from home? Did that happen at that time, or that's too early?
No, not so much. Not so much. It was more the teacher choosing and sharing a document to say, do this for next week. It was very manual. It was, lesson by lesson.
Right.
There was no planning. There was no forward planning to it.
Okay. And did you think at that time like that it would evolve and be something that would be what it is now?
Yeah. Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yeah, because when I started Prep It was really with the CPF. I don't know if you know about CPF.
We should explain that to people watching just briefly what it is.
CPF is a government-funded training program. So everybody who works in France, they accumulate points, and these points go towards paying for training. And it was introduced in France in 2015. And when I opened my company, I had that in mind because I thought, well, there's lots of budgets here. It's very administrative to get started. But I had an excellent assistant. We started up together. And I thought, we can make it accessible to a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't have had training in the company. And for us, it was a very good business plan. So when I started with that, it wasn't on a platform. Every person worked for a company, and every company had a different rate of pay per hour. But the organizations belonging to the state that organize training, those organizations would allocate a certain amount of euros per hour. And sometimes it was 10, and sometimes it was 100. And it could be anything in between. But for me, I always paid my teachers the same thing.
Sure.
I wasn't going to, dock their pay if I happen to have a contract with a low amount per hour. So I knew that the blended learning was necessary. We had to have online just to organize the costing of each hour.
Right.
So, if I would have liked to have a certain rate, but I actually had half of that, then I'd put half the hours online, half the hours with a teacher, and then we'd get more or less the same amount of money for the same amount of teacher hours. And I knew it was necessary because budget-wise, it was the only way for me. And you see today, there's a lot of competition all over the world. And there's teachers, unfortunately, who will charge €3 an hour, €2 an hour. And there are organizations who will exploit that, but still sell a lot more cheaply than people who are employing teachers of the caliber I have.
Absolutely.
So that's how it happens. So what you have to do is use online work because you can fit a budget. Yeah. But the problem with that is, I don't know if you had a question.
Well, no. When you say online work, can you give us an example? Because there's so many different examples. So what do you mean? Like, what's an example?
Online.
When you say online work.
All right, there's several different sorts. I think I should begin by saying, if I sell online work alongside teacher hours, the reason I underline the term blended is because I don't just sell a package of online hours and just do that, and then we'll invoice it. Right. I integrate it into the program.
Right.
So The most common use is for exam preparation.
Yeah.
So if you have somebody who wants to prepare a TOEFL exam or a TOEIC exam or a Cambridge exam even, not all of them, but some of them, you can buy an online module to prepare.
Yeah.
And then the teacher knows that their student is going to prepare this exam, so they can help them around the site, and they can say, right, well, I recommend that you do 2 mock tests over the weekend, and I'll look at the scores. We'll see where you fall down. And, so it's really the teacher, it's a respect for the work. The student is working. He's working with you as a teacher, but he's working at home as well. And if you go and see what he's done and you recognize it, that's respecting his time and what he's done. So it's more motivating.
Yeah.
So that's one sort.
Yeah.
There's another sort I use for business English. I started it, and in fact, I started it with Hillary in a company. We did workshops, and if I had a workshop on negotiation, then I would send the group to prepare modules on negotiation in their online platform. Then they'd come to the workshop with a certain amount of vocabulary and terminology. Hi, Hillary.
Right.
I'm just telling them. I think it was Malt we started with that, wasn't it? Yeah, I think it was. Oh, you've not got your mic on. But anyway, we did that so the students would be prepared and have a certain amount of things in their memory before they started the actual simulation of their negotiation or their meeting or whichever module they'd done. So it means you optimize the time with the teacher.
Yeah.
And we do this in individual lessons now. So instead of saying to a student, this is your homework, you have to do this now before next time, you say to them, we have an appointment to talk about English for email next Thursday morning at 10. In order to optimize our time and write an excellent email together, why don't you do module whatever on emails and come back to me, and we'll just get through a lot more together.
My question is, that's great, but what, in a way, I'm playing devil's advocate, but this is just very interesting because somebody could say, well, what's the difference between selling them a textbook and audio tapes and having them do that? Isn't it just a technology change? It is homework in the sense that it's So why do we call it blended learning when it's online, but not blended learning when it's audio tapes, for example?
Because blended learning, it has to be online anyway to call it blended learning.
So it's more of just a different way of talking.
Partly.
Okay.
It's also to do with adapting to our times. Because right now, before COVID, most people did their lessons in the classroom, to be honest, and then they had to go home and they had to work on the computer. But still, they would be on their computer quite a long time every day, and it was just accessibility. If you want to do your English, well, it's on a link, it's on a platform, like everything else you do in your life. So it saves you time. It means for the teacher as well, they have a knowledge of everything, and they don't have to photocopy, they don't have to scan. Everything is there and it's documented. And the third reason for me, and the reason I insisted on it, is when you say it's blended learning, you have a module which has a timer on it. So you, as a teacher and as a language trainer, as a language school, you know how many hours people have done, and it's documented. And then you can invoice it, you can track it, and you can prove
that's hugely
the hours
different than selling them a textbook and some tapes.
Yeah, it's not the same because you're selling an hour, time you sell, but you're actually selling a student's hour.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
And also that's how the French system works. It's all on hours of training.
Yeah. And did you at that time, and I'm curious, like compared to now, run into the issue of students, saying they're going to do it, but not doing it, or, feeling like either at that time, maybe like just not in the habit enough of using a computer to learn things, and maybe now feeling like they're always on their computer, so maybe they don't want to do it, or no?
I think all the people who are doing exams, they would do their exam prep. So instead of doing the exam prep with the TOEIC mock tests on loads of photocopies or in the book or the Barron's thing with the CD.
Yeah, which is
they're doing it online.
Much easier.
Because they've got their own motivation.
Yeah.
It's always hard to motivate people in individual lessons just to learn. Some people get on with it, some people don't. Before COVID, when I had a language lab, and in companies I still do this, I have language lab time where people come in and they do their work online, but kind of monitored with a teacher. That works very well. But you need the luxury of space and time to do that.
That's right.
So I have done really good programs in companies, and I've done it on my premises, and it really helps because the teacher is there and they help and they give you some feedback, and people clock up their hours. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard to get people to work.
Well, and it's perfect what you just said for what I wanted to ask. It's hard to get people to work. What about people that maybe don't do the unit in the online blended learning, but they're just addicted to doing stuff online in English, like what they wouldn't call work, so like watching series or playing games or doing things. And because I've met many people like that, and their proficiency just shoots up compared to some people who, feel like their only experience online is work, not fun. Is that ever an issue, or do you think that some of the online materials would be better if they were less like conventional in the sense of homework?
Right, now I have to talk to you. I'm not talking to you as a teacher now. I'm just going to talk to you as a language.
And I'm not talking about test prep as much, because I also have a lot of experience with test prep, and it's definitely easier to succeed with online. It's just perfect for online compared to like some big bulky book and CDs. It's
that's true.
But for other stuff, I don't know. I'm not always sure.
It's hard. It's hard because as a language school owner, the only way you can be profitable, or the only way you can fit with certain government budgets, is to sell online work, and that online work has to be documented, registered on the platform, and signed for. And that is why you have to use it. So it's a different thing. It's part of the course. It's an integral part of the course. And I have to bring it in at the sales stage, because people say, oh, I don't understand. I've only got 20 hours with a teacher with you, but with the other shower, I've got 54 hours with a teacher. And I'm like, okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 24 hours, 34 hours online. I'm going to give you 2 or 3 different platforms, which I have personally chosen for you. And you will help your teacher maximize the time together. And I say that the teachers I have are the best in France. I pay them accordingly, and you will get the benefit of that, but you have to work alongside them. You could do a lot of hours with another place, but you wouldn't make the progress. And that's the way I sell. And it's the only way to and if I don't sell the online work, it means that I can't charge the prices I need to charge to pay my personnel. And if I don't have my type of personnel, my quality is rubbish, and I'm ashamed to do what I do.
I totally get it.
There's a reason for everything, but it's not easy.
So what do you feel like to teachers who are watching, who wonder about face-to-face versus online, like in their futures, really? Because if they're just starting out, obviously it wasn't so long ago that it didn't occur to a teacher to just teach online, but to many people getting a certificate, a TEFL certificate for the first time, especially since COVID, they may be thinking, not that they're going to work for one of these companies we mentioned before, who shall remain nameless, who are exploiting teachers. Obviously, you don't get a TEFL certificate to go make $10 an hour, 10 euros an hour. But you might be thinking that you could freelance, that you could hook up with a better paying company that does online work. But if you're thinking in person, online, both, like, what do you feel, having worked with so many different teachers? Like, what do you feel like a teacher starting out should be thinking about? Being flexible to do both?
I think you need to be. There are some platforms, I don't know, you've probably heard of them, but you don't get that much per hour. However, you get lots of experience, and you know where your talents lie and what you're good at. And I think that any teacher, even if you've got a good TEFL and even if you've got a degree behind you, you need experience. So you need to, people in different domains, they're doing a stage with no pay.
Yeah.
What you could be doing as an English teacher is teaching on the platform, finding what you're good at. This is how I worked out.
That's an interesting way to think about it. Yeah.
I would do that.
But online or in person or both? Like if you were getting started, because it's interesting now, right? Like we would never have thought about that. Like, like would there ever be a CELTA that prepares you for online? Like an online CELTA?
It's funny you should say that, because I'm writing one with Joss right now. We'll give you news on that. It won't be out till next year, but we're actually writing one.
It makes sense, right? Because maybe some teachers, even just getting into it, are never thinking about doing something in person.
Yeah, the problem is with working in person. I think if you get good experience, there are some huge language schools that still exist that have big company contracts. They have the Pôle emploi, the unemployment office contracts. And if you get some experience working there, it's not necessarily high pay, but it's very organized, and you'll have a system to follow, and you'll gain lots of experience. So you could do that, and it would be a good start.
If you're teaching adults, and then you could do something similar
adults,
for kids, working for some teach abroad company.
Yeah. I think
again, getting experience, maybe not being paid or treated as you might want to be so much, but like you said, it's almost like a internship. Some people do unpaid internships.
It is. Yeah. The problem is with when you're working in person, there's a very great danger that you could finish up with something that resembles a zero contract, 0 hour. Do you know those? In Great Britain, you have that. Like zero contracts where you're just, you're under contract to a company, but they'll just call you to say, right, you're going to work 4 hours tomorrow, and you just get paid you 4 hours. And teaching can become like that if you've just got a few hours. Especially, it's more dangerous when you manage it when you're in a town and you have to move across town. Because if you have, like I described with my bad experience, I had a lesson at whatever time very early in the morning, then I had to go somewhere else, and then I'd have 2 days with nothing. And then, what you could find is you might spend all day, every day, traveling across town, being on time for this person, that person. You arrive at work several times a day. You can't be late. You have to travel a lot and pay for your travel. But you could do that from like 8 a.m. Monday till 10 p.m. Friday, but you might only teach 15 hours.
Could you teach online in between? Could you teach online in between, like, and do both, or? Maybe,
but you still have to get home and do it.
That's right. Yeah.
You see, it's all this fitting in and the organization. So you would be in danger of earning. And if you're on 10 euros an hour, that's 150 hours a week. Right. You're doing like a 70-hour week.
And are there schools anymore for adults where you'd be employed and just have classes all day? Not really.
Yeah, there are. There's great schools.
There still are.
Yeah.
Where they're
there's some with the commerce in the regions. They do that. You have certain big language schools, especially if you're in the provinces. If there's a big language school, they'll have.
That's right. And I've heard actually they're looking for teachers in France for a lot of those places. It depends on the country, though, obviously. For sure.
Exactly. So there are good outfits out there. There's good places.
Yeah. And about what you feel makes a good teacher. I mean, you've talked about it in the sense of just how overall quality is important, and that you wouldn't. But what can you be a little more specific, like especially for new teachers out there to hear from you, like what's important to you in a teacher?
You need people who are open-minded, because you're going to teach all sorts of people, and just the nature of the business with timing, you have to be open-minded and flexible. It's very difficult for me to work with teachers who say, oh no, but not on Friday afternoons, or not too early in the morning, or I can't work after 5 p.m. That's hard, because it gives you very little flexibility. So I'm never going to prioritize those kind of teachers. So that's one thing in terms of personality. Also, you've got to like people. You've got to find something likable and interesting and fascinating about everyone you teach. You've got to think, oh, that's my new person. Oh, isn't it great? I can't wait to see them next week, and we can do this, this, and this. You've got to have that. It's got to be innate energy that just kind of comes up when you've met your new people. And yes, you're going to have difficult people, but that's life. Some people are easier than others. But if you're the sort of person who in life likes to meet people and finds people interesting and funny, and you want to get along with them, that's half the battle, I think.
Yeah.
In terms of organization, you've got to be very organized, and you've got to plan ahead to a certain extent. Maybe not when you've got loads of experience, because you might have a similar type of profile as you've had before. But you can't just think, oh, I've got 6 hours today, I've got to get through it, chat. That's not what you can't do that. You have to say, right, that guy last week, oh my goodness, remember the present perfect. What a nightmare that was. Oh my goodness, we've got to sort this out.
Yeah.
Or we're never going to get off the ground. We've just got to sort that out next week. As you come in with a plan, it doesn't take a lot of preparation, but it takes thought.
Yeah.
Because you've got to, for your student, they have to know that you're on their side, that you've been thinking about them, and that you've brought something prepared for them. Even if it's just prepared in your head, but you've just got to appear with it. You can't just show up and just like, oh yeah, what should we talk about? What do you want to talk about?
Yeah.
It's not enough. It's not enough. You've also got to have a certain amount of material in your arsenal. So you've got to think, you've got to have, I like to have, this is my secret, I have 4 stages in a lesson, like the 4 quatre points forts. So 1, small talk, introduction, how are you, blah, blah, blah. That can be 5 minutes, it can be 10 minutes, okay? Then you can have theory, so really something solid, the meat of it, if you like. So it could be grammar, it could be getting your head around understanding an accent, it could be something like writing an email. So that's your theory. Then you have some kind of a video about the theory. So something that illustrates, something that relaxes the student, and they'll just follow it and it will confirm what you've just gone through. And then you have a hands-on like simulation of something real. So introduction, theory, video, something real. And that will take you through an hour and a half. So easy. Boom, boom, boom. And then you can give them homework, either something online to prepare for next week or some exercise to prepare for next week.
Right.
But really, that's what you need. You need to balance it. Because if it's chat all the way through, you can't, if you've got objectives to reach in 20 hours, which unfortunately is the case quite often with CPF.
Yeah.
This is the government contracts, because you don't get much money every year. So, your hour has to be effective. Right. So you can't just chat through it. But equally, you can't just have theory and grammar, because that's so boring and the people won't stay engaged. And for you as a teacher, it's not expanding your scope of what you can do.
Right.
So you've got to have that kind of balance. It's very simple. It's nothing. It's not rocket science.
Yeah. Well, I think simple structure and simple, especially as you're starting out, is just is you can't overemphasize the importance of that. I mean, when you look at musicians, we were talking about this last week with teacher Charlie's lessons, but if you look at bebop and the jazz musicians, and how they improvised the way they did, and you think, oh, they must not have, they were just these kind of rebels or something, but it's completely the opposite. They were so focused on the structures, they were just so disciplined in their learning of theory, that's the paradox that after that, and I think teachers are like that too. The improv comes from the
There's loads of amazing materials out there online, not just online methods blending learning, but on, as we talked about,
I want to ask you about that before we go. Those projects you're working on.
Exactly. But you have to have your structure first. You have to have an idea of direction, where you're going, and then once you know where you're going, if I want to do some grammar with someone, there's all sorts of resources. There's something I've pinpointed. A, I can find it online, and B, they'll give you an indication of what to do next. So that's great. That's sorted. If you want to do a video, there's so many videos, and just on YouTube, there's so many channels, amazing things. So you can always find something that's exactly what you need. And if you want to stimulate, if you want to find a role play or a real email to write, or a situation where you have to contribute to find a case study or something, there's loads of that too. And it's all there, but you need your structure first. If you just look for something online, and you're not sure what you're looking for, you'll just come up with something which might not be the right level, it might just waste time. You have to know what you want first. It's just like anything in life. You know what you want, and then you can find it, and then it's the right thing.
Well, then let's segue. We got to segue from that into LearnBook, because what you're saying is if you just sort of, you need structure, but if you're also just like sort of randomly looking for things, that's not good either, right? So can you talk about what LearnBook is, something that I've worked with you on? I think it'd be very interesting for people to hear about it, where it is now and where it's going.
Okay, so the first thing about LearnBook is, I don't know if I told you this, Jason, we've just learned that we've not won the bid, the call for tender. Mm-hmm. Okay, we've just learned this.
Okay.
However, LearnBook is still very much operational, and we're launching properly now. Richard is working. Richard is our technical guy. Mm-hmm. So if I give an overview of Workbook, it's like an online platform for English teachers. So at the beginning, it was just a platform to be able to organize your lessons and time them. And then it evolved with the content. So Jason and I are in charge of making the content, and Jason found lots of links with tags on. So you just go onto LearnBook. If you've got somebody with a level B1 and he needs to do the past perfect, you type that in and you've got lots and lots of links of the right level with no paywall or anything that you can follow. Right. So it saves you a lot of time. And you've got the same for business English. You've got the same for specialty English. We've got some lovely videos that Jason and Anna made for us, which are fantastic for each, for lots of grammar, for lots of business role plays and situations. So you can just look for something. So if you're in the case where you've got 4 lessons in front of you, you've got 15 minutes to prepare everybody, you just go tag, 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 boom, 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 and you've got a lot of things prepared. Mm-hmm. Now, for the rollout, we've linked it into Teams. So what you do is...
But it is available now, or is it not until you...
No, it'll be available soon.
Okay.
I would say, yeah. Mm-hmm. In a slight, it'll be, yeah, I'll have to talk to you about that later.
Sure. Sorry. But what about Teams? That's interesting.
But basically, any teacher who wants to sign up for LearnBook, teachers are going to sign up, like for ESL Brains or something like that, or One Stop English. And what you do is you have your content, so you have the access to these links. You have lesson plans, which I've written with my 4-point boom, boom, boom. Mm-hmm. So you have that for general English for 6 levels and for business English for 5 levels. Mm-hmm. So if you want to do a 20 or 30 hour course from A2 to B1 or for business B1 to B2, you can do that, and you could just follow, and I give indicators and I've got the links within.
So that would be good for like a new teacher, for example.
Yeah, it's perfect. Or it could be a fallback for something.
Yeah.
And you can link. And now what you do is you have to be signed up to Teams. We don't have to be, but it's better if you're signed up to Teams, because you open your Teams, LearnBook is in it. You have a part that registers each lesson and says, Mr. So-and-so has done 6 hours out of 20. There's a file with all the documentation of everything he's done. You've got a link to Google Drive for your things that you scan in and you tag, and it's all there. So it's on the search engine as well, and you can just bring everything up for your lesson. And when you're on Teams, you open up what you're working on with the student. You drag and drop the other elements you want to see with him. If you don't cover everything, you can, or even if you do, you can send the whole lesson to your teacher at the end, to your student at the end, and you can finish off your lesson. And at the same time, you're saying, right, I'll see you next week I'll see you the same time next week. Lovely to see you. Have a good weekend. And you're dragging and dropping their homework and everything you saw in the lesson, and boom, you send that off at the end of the meeting. Yeah. And you don't have any downtime. The downstream work of, you said you wanted to look at this, that. So everything is contained, 3 minutes preparation and real-time downstream follow-up.
It's great.
That's what it's for.
Yeah, what you're describing sounds like you're teaching someone online, but it's both, right? Because even if it's online, you're maybe doing some blended learning with that student.
Yeah, the thing is, with the online, any homework you send or anything you do in the lesson as a video is documented. So it counts as online hours. Anything they do themselves from their keyboard, that's counted as an online hour. So it doesn't have to be a whole method that you buy online. You can use LearnBook to do that.
Yeah.
In the classroom, you would use it. What I would use it for in the classroom is I would have a projector. I'd use my computer with a projector, and I would choose my things that I open up. I would select in the same way with the tags, and I'd prepare that way and open them up. And then I'd have a record of what each class comprised, and I can send it to the student after the lesson, or I can keep it on their file.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you also, I think we chatted about this recently a little bit, but where do you feel people in business English are, like at companies, as far as wanting an online lesson versus wanting in person? And do you think that's going to change in the future? And do you think maybe it's been affected by COVID in certain ways? Or just what's your feeling? Do people want, they say, oh, in person is still more valuable, or I have to have in person? And are there people on the other side of it that say, like, I don't have time for in person, like it's much easier for me to do it online?
There's a bit of both. What you have to know with COVID is, yes, we all changed doing our lessons online, but people in companies changed. They all have 2 days a week at home. And those 2 days for them are precious because they're more productive. So they often like to do their lesson when they're at home because they've got no interruptions. And they're not going to cancel because nothing untoward is going to happen. They've got their timing. If they're in the company environment, they've got less control over their surroundings.
Right.
So they prefer, a lot of them prefer it. What I would recommend, though, and this is what we've been doing at Prep It, even the people we've just been teaching online, we go and see them every so often. Every so often. Obviously you can't do it if people are in different regions, but if you're in the town where your people work, you try and organize, and it makes it into an event. And it kind of,
when you see people on screens and then you meet them in person, there's like a certain excitement.
Yeah, it's very positive. I like it. So it's nice to mix both if you can.
What I remember early on was people not wanting to do it online because they just felt like, this isn't real enough, and part of it, the technology wasn't as fluid in an online classroom, for example, Skype or whatever. So it can be, and part of it was just people weren't used to it. But now I feel like some people, you're talking about the person who's at home and it's 2 days, but aren't there people that are like, but when I'm home, I'm just on the screen the whole time. So I actually want an in-person class to get a break from the screen. Whereas in the past it was like, I'm not on screens enough. This is weird. Isn't there an element of I just too much Zoom or too much Teams? Or
no, I don't think so. I think it's more they just think in terms of productivity and timing.
Okay.
And efficiency.
So you don't,
that's what it's all about for them. That's what I found with my clients. What I have had a few requests for next year is events. Like breakfast and lunch and after work and all of that. And I think maybe the companies, I think it's a human resources thing because people are very all over the place and they want to give them something for team building. So I think that maybe, not necessarily the lessons, but I think people learning English, they might get together for something more easily.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Like if you're going to get together, if you're going to get together, it's not a class as much as it's some kind of activity, and the class stuff is done more online. Yeah. And what do you feel is there, can you say one of these is generally more productive than the other, teaching like one-on-one to an adult, or teaching in a group online? I mean, like, do you feel like online works better for one-to-one lessons, or online works better for groups when we're talking about adults, like business English?
Oh, I haven't thought of that. I like the workshop thing, which we did with Hilary. We've done that 3 times now. I did one, Hilary's done 2. Online. Yeah. But people, I don't know, if it's a group, people are less likely to think they have to show up. We have more
Yeah.
absentees. If it's one-to-one, we never have people absent online.
Yeah. I'm curious too, as a teacher personally, like, because I hear all the time from teachers that like, I'll teach one-to-one, but I don't want to teach an online class because, it's so hard to kind of keep the energy going and to make it, as good as it can be in person. Whereas, a one-to-one, it's kind of like you're sitting like us right now is not so different. But I have the opposite feeling as a teacher. I would much rather teach a group and teach one-to-one because I guess because I've discovered ways. I mean, I used to be terrible at it at the beginning. Like I've discovered ways to make it exciting to be in a group online. And I guess there are teachers who haven't had that experience yet, maybe. And so they feel like it's just too hard to manage. And people not paying attention, cameras off, there's somebody else, they have a hard time.
As a trainer, I work with a lot of different teachers and trainers. You are particular. There's not many people who maintain your energy and who plan ahead and have all the ideas. You have to have a certain attitude, and you have to have, you've always got so many different ideas going through. And I think it's quite exhausting if you're not like you are naturally.
Well, thank you. But I think also, I've been teaching online since about 2013 in some shape, way, or form. So I think also it's experience too. I have a feeling. You just figure it out. And also just like, I guess I can also compare like when I'm using Zoom and using breakout rooms. And I just remember the days where breakout rooms, it was so impossible because of people's connections. Like you go into a room and you'd be lucky if people are still there kind of thing. So, and people are more aware of how it works. So, I guess I'm always comparing to the past and feeling like, wow, it's so much easier and better now.
No, it is great. You can do anything and it is great. I must admit, I miss the classroom for groups. I miss stomping around and writing on the board and getting.
But I wonder, and I love that you said that. And I have it. I teach 3 days a week at a university in 2 universities in Paris. One of the
really good fun.
One of them is just in a classroom, big classroom with whiteboards, and it's great, and with interactive media and stuff also. So it's both, And I also teach a group that half the classes are online and half are in person, which is really interesting. I've never had it that like 50-50, not because of COVID kind of thing. And that's really cool because then there are things, that you can do, because there are things you can do in the classroom you can't do online. And even though some people think it doesn't work the other way, as I said, once you discover ways to improve group lessons online, you realize there are things you can do online that don't work as well in the physical classroom. So it's really kind of cool. I feel like in the end, the students and me, we all benefit a lot from that because I'm able to teach in different ways in both, and they're able to benefit from it in both. But I'm wondering about like the missing the markers and the whiteboards, like how much of that is like our experience. The saying, you don't miss what you never knew. Are there going to be teachers in the future that never teach groups online and they're never going to feel that it would have been better or nicer because they've never done it? Or you think there's always going to be online teaching with, there's always going to be a physical classroom with a whiteboard?
Yeah, I think there is. I think there's a lot about community with further education.
Yeah.
And I think the idea of having people together and everybody working together, everybody shouting at once or trying to get the right answer, you can't reproduce that online. But that's why online work and lessons are much more productive, I find. Because you can do as well 1 hour at a time. I would not send a teacher to a company for just 1 hour and that's it, and then send them elsewhere. However, I would happily sit a teacher in front of their Teams or Zoom connection for a few hours with different companies all over France, all over the Paris region.
Well, that's what's amazing too.
It's just so easy. So you get more done, and you could do 1 hour at a time. You can even have 2 1-hour lessons in a week because you don't have to schlep out to wherever and do your hour and come back. So it's so much easier to organize, and you really get the most out of your time. That's why I like it as well. I like efficiency, me. I like it.
I know you do. It's great. That's why it's great to work with you, because I need people. I need to work with people like that. Before we stop today, where are you? You mentioned LearnBook. What else are you working on right now? Because you're always working on so many interesting things.
Yeah.
What
So
else?
I'm working in France for the government-funded training with CPF. All the tests have changed. So I'm working on teacher training for everyone who works for me. I'm making little videos and documentation so that people can learn to do the Chloe test and the LinguaSkill 4 skill and the TOEIC 4 skill. So that's one big project. I'm also working on a teacher training project for Chloe with Linguade. So I'm giving my teachers a watered down version, but I'm going to do something a bit bigger with more, with more documentation for Linguade, and maybe some general teacher training.
Great.
What else? Is that all I'm working on? That's my.
And do you enjoy doing like? Would you not enjoy your work as much if you were always doing teacher training, or you were always just managing your business, or you were always doing the online resources? You like the mix of things?
It goes through stages. Yeah, I don't like too much admin. For example, we've got an audit at Prepit in 2 weeks' time. That's an awful lot of work, and I can't say I enjoy it. I have a certain pride.
If you said you enjoyed an audit, I'd be like, wow. I mean, I know Louise is a superwoman and everything,
but no, it's a lot of work. It's very stressful, and there's a lot of documentation because the French law is very complex. So I don't like that much. I've started teaching recently. This year I didn't teach much, and actually I absolutely love it. I'd forgotten how much I love it, and it's the key thing. So it gives me more motivation with my clients, and it gives me I don't know, just managing the teachers better. It's a bit more insight, and it's maybe more creative.
And did you do that because, as you know, I guess someone at a company like high up decides they're gonna work the daily kind of stuff to see what it's like is it that kind of thing, or did you just want to teach, or you out of necessity, or in a situation where you needed to teach, or for them?
It's partly necessity, partly certain clients, somebody in there wants me.
That's sort of what I meant by necessity, I guess.
And the actual meeting, just working with them, is very important, and it means I have an insight. It means I have an insight to what their team are doing, and I understand the company better. So the teachers, we all work better as a team with them.
So it occurs to you when you have this opportunity, okay, this is also going to help me. In those ways,
And the teacher training that started with Linguade. They asked me to create some courses for them. But then afterwards, it made me realize that I could train my teachers better and make it a bit easier for them. And I think I'll always like that. I think that's my first thing, actually.
Yeah, I love teacher training is my first thing. I don't do as much of it as I'd like to. It's
really good fun.
Used to do much more. But, okay, wow, that was so much fun to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Excuse me, the dog's going crazy.
The dog knows it's time. Your dog has been trained well on the length of webinars, right? It's time.
Yes, it's great. He's got a good timer. So well, thank you, and it's been really good to talk to you about broader subjects.
I think it's really. I'm just imagining myself being a new teacher or a fairly inexperienced teacher watching this. I think it's just really, really valuable to hear the things that you've said and what the experience you have. And wow, well, I wish you continued success, and I'm happy.
Thank you very much.
Hopefully, I will be part of that continued success in some ways. So it's really great to have you here, Louise.
For all your teachers listening, I love working with Jason. He's always so positive, and he can do anything. He says he likes this or he likes that better, but he can actually do anything on this earth. So it's true.
Thank you.
I'm always surprised. I say, well, who can I ask to do that? Can you do that, Jess? Yeah, I can do that. Oh yeah, I've taught TOEFL. Yeah, no, sorry.
I definitely like the variety. I need the variety for sure.
Yeah.
So that's good. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Thanks everybody for tuning in to another edition of Featured Teachers. See you next time, and take care, teachers everywhere.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Louise.